For years, the Epstein files have lived in a strange limbo, half legal record, half internet legend. On one side, they're real documents tied to investigations into Jeffrey Epstein's crimes and powerful social circle. On the other, they're treated like a magical vault where every rumor, name, and conspiracy is supposedly hiding. Every delay feels suspicious, every redaction feels theatrical, and every release feels not enough. Facts, law, politics, and online imagination all collide in one noisy pile. At this point, release the files means something different to everyone, and exactly everything to no one. What people mean when they say Epstein files. In plain terms, the Epstein files refer to unclassified records held by U.S. authorities that relate to Epstein's investigation and prosecution, plus related materials gathered in the orbit of his associates. Those records can include interview reports, case correspondence, evidence logs, contact lists, flight logs, court filings, and internal investigative documents. Some pieces have been public for years through lawsuits, court unsealing decisions, and reporting. Others have remained sealed or withheld to protect victims, witnesses, and ongoing investigative equities. This is where confusion starts. A contact book is not the same thing as a client list. A name appearing in a phone directory, an email thread, or a flight log is not, by itself, proof of wrongdoing. Investigative files often contain dead ends, tips that go nowhere, hearsay that never gets corroborated, and references to people who are witnesses, reporters, lawyers, or simply part of a social ecosystem. That doesn't make transparency meaningless, just complicated. The client list claim, and why it won't die. The most radioactive phrase in this entire saga is the Epstein list, usually imagined online as a neatly typed spreadsheet of powerful villains waiting to be exposed. In reality, the argument over whether such a clean, definitive document even exists has gone on for years without resolution. In 2025, that argument exploded when the Department of Justice stated there was no credible evidence of a blackmail operation or a prosecutable client roster hiding in its files. That statement didn't calm anyone down. It did the opposite, convincing skeptics that something must be missing and convincing supporters that the myth had finally met bureaucracy. The problem is that the phrase client list sounds simple, while real investigations are anything but. Epstein's world produced mountains of records, not a single villain menu. Contact books, emails, and phone directories became internet shorthand for guilt. Even though they often include everyone from billionaires to landscapers, famous names sit next to electricians, assistants, and random acquaintances like they were all invited to the same conspiracy meeting. This mismatch between messy reality and clean storytelling is why the claim refuses to die. A simple list is emotionally satisfying. The truth is complicated, slow, and terrible at going viral. Trump, Epstein, and why this became political napalm. The Trump-Epstein connection became one of these central political flashpoints because it sits at the crossroads of three forces: Epstein's documented social networking, Trump's public profile, and a political environment where accusations travel faster than verification. A key moment in late 2025 involved the House Oversight Committee's Democrats releasing emails they said came from Epstein's estate, messages that referenced Trump in striking terms, including the line describing Trump as the dog that hasn't barked. Those emails were presented publicly as part of a broader transparency push and were quickly amplified across news and social media. But even here, the responsible reading is careful. An email is a piece of evidence about what someone wrote, not automatically proof of what happened. It can be important, relevant, even damning in implication, but it still must be weighed like evidence, not treated like a verdict. Congress steps in. Congress finally jumped into the Epstein saga when public patience ran out and redactions started feeling like performance art. What began as frustration quickly turned into bipartisan outrage framed as a moral issue, not a conspiracy hobby. Lawmakers accused the Justice Department of dragging its feet and hiding behind black ink. Subpoenas flew, letters piled up, and hearings became pressure cookers. Trust in institutions, they warned, was leaking faster than the documents themselves. This phase felt different because it wasn't symbolic scolding anymore. The political danger flipped. Opposing release suddenly looked worse than supporting it. From there, Congress stopped asking and started trying to force the issue. The Epstein Files Transparency Act. The Epstein Files Transparency Act was Congress's way of saying, enough suspense, open the vault. Passed by overwhelming votes, the law ordered the Justice Department to release unclassified Epstein records by a firm deadline. Supporters framed it as a cure for years of rumor, delay, and selective disclosure. Critics worried it would turn sensitive material into public spectacle or endanger victims. The compromise was redactions with rules, not secrecy by default. Politically, the message was clear. Blocking release had become untenable. Legally, the burden shifted from lawmakers to the DOJ. And that's where expectations ran headfirst into reality. The release that didn't feel like a release. When the Justice Department began publishing Epstein-related material, the response was swift and unsatisfied. Thousands of pages appeared, but many were heavily redacted, partially duplicated, or already known through earlier reporting. To critics, the release felt like compliance in form, but not in spirit. Social media quickly focused less on what was revealed and more on what was missing. Entire pages blacked out became symbols of continued secrecy. Officials argued the scale of the archive and legal obligations made rapid, full disclosure impossible. The public heard something else: delay, deflection, and damage control. The gap between expectations and delivery reignited accusations of selective transparency. Instead of closure, the release became another chapter in the controversy: redactions, delays, and legal limits. Redaction became the most visible and misunderstood part of the Epstein disclosures. Legally, the government is required to protect victim identities, uncharged individuals, and sensitive investigative methods. Politically, every redaction looked like evidence of a cover-up. Lawyers and analysts emphasized that investigative files are filled with raw leads, hearsay, and dead ends that cannot responsibly be released wholesale. The public, however, saw black bars as intentional concealment. Delays compounded the problem, reinforcing suspicion even when justified by workload and review requirements. The more the DOJ explained, the less convincing it sounded to an already distrustful audience. In this phase, process itself became the villain. Transparency laws collided with the realities of criminal justice administration. The role of the House Oversight Committee. As DOJ releases disappointed many observers, the House Oversight Committee became an alternative pipeline for disclosure. Through subpoenas and document demands directed at Epstein's estate and related parties, the committee released its own batches of records. These releases were framed as accountability measures, though critics argued they sometimes lacked full context. Supporters countered that congressional disclosure was necessary precisely because executive agencies were moving too slowly. This dual-track release system created confusion about what was official, what was partial, and what was politically curated. Still, it shifted power back toward lawmakers and kept the issue alive in the public eye. Oversight releases ensured the Epstein story did not quietly fade. They also guaranteed that each new batch would reignite debate, public reaction, and political fallout. Public reaction to the Epstein files evolved from curiosity into fatigue mixed with anger. Polling showed limited approval of how the issue was handled, even among supporters of those in power. Activists accused officials of protecting elites, while skeptics accused influencers of manufacturing outrage. For politicians, the files became radioactive. Ignoring them angered voters, but embracing them risked unpredictable consequences. The issue fractured alliances and exposed divisions within political bases. What began as a demand for justice increasingly looked like a test of institutional credibility. Every statement, delay, or clarification was parsed for hidden meaning. By this stage, the Epstein files were no longer just documents. They were a proxy for trust in government itself. Where the Epstein files stand now. As of early 2026, only a small fraction of the Epstein archive has been publicly released, despite legal mandates and public pressure. Millions of documents reportedly remain under review, redaction, or internal processing. Officials maintain that further releases are ongoing, though timelines remain unclear. Critics argue that partial disclosure undermines the purpose of transparency laws. Supporters of caution insist that speed cannot override responsibility to victims. The tension between accountability and harm prevention remains unresolved. What is clear is that the files have outgrown their original purpose as evidence. They now function as a political, cultural, and institutional stress test. And until clarity replaces suspicion, the story is unlikely to end. If you want to understand how power, secrecy, and public trust collide in real time, this story matters. The Epstein files aren't just documents. They're a mirror held up to the system itself. If this breakdown helped you see it more clearly, don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives that cut through the noise.